Today we're going to talk about an idea that might just change the way you think about success and failure entirely. It's called Tails You Win, and it's all about the hidden math that quietly runs the world.
So let me just ask you a question to get us started. To be a really great investor, one of the best, how often do you think you need to be right? Like 90% of the time? 80? Just get a number in your head.
See, the thing is, we're all wired to see the finished product. We see the brilliant investment after it's already a 10-bagger. We see the flawless comedy special on Netflix, but we have no idea how many jokes bombed in dusty clubs to get there.
And because of that, we just assume that success means being right pretty much all the time. But what if I told you that's completely backwards? What if you could fail, or just be kind of average, most of the time, and still come out on top, wildly successful? That's the whole idea behind Tails You Win.
It all boils down to this concept called long tails. And to really get it, we're going to look at the stories of an art dealer who escaped Nazi Germany and a nearly broke animator you've probably heard of.
Okay, so what is a long tail? It's really just a simple idea. In a lot of things, a very small number of events are responsible for almost all the results. Think of it like the 1% of your efforts that produce 99% of the payoff.
Let's look at this guy, Heinz Berggruen. He fled Germany in 1936 and went on to become one of the greatest art dealers in history. Now, his secret wasn't some magical ability to spot a masterpiece from a mile away. Nope, his strategy was volume. He bought tons of art, just vast quantities of it. And you know what? 99% of what he bought ended up being pretty much worthless. But that other 1%? Oh, that 1% included works by Picasso and Matisse. And that made all the difference.
He basically operated like an index fund for art. He just bought everything he could get his hands on and then just waited. He knew a couple of huge winners would eventually emerge. He could be wrong 99% of the time and still become a billionaire because the wins from that tiny 1% were just so huge they completely dwarfed all the losses.
And this isn't some one-off thing. Look at Walt Disney. His first studio? Bankrupt. By the mid-1930s, he had made over 400 cartoons. And yeah, people liked them, but financially, most of them were duds, losing a fortune. But then came 1938. 83 minutes of film called Snow White. That single movie, a single-tail event, was such a massive hit, it paid off all the company's debt, financed the studio they still use today, and turned Disney into a household name. One home run paid for hundreds and hundreds of strikeouts.
So, okay, this long-tail dynamic is pretty clear in things like art and movies. But now, let's turn to the place where this matters most for a lot of us, investing. And there is a huge secret here that I think is going to blow your mind.
If we look at venture capital, funding risky startups, the math is just brutal. Get this. Out of 21,000 investments, a full 65% lost money. And almost all of the industry's profits, they came from a measly 0.5% of the companies they backed. That is the definition of a tail-driven business.
And honestly, that probably doesn't shock you, right? We all know startups are basically lottery tickets. We expect most of them to fail, and for a tiny few, the next Google or Amazon, to become these massive winners. It fits how we think about risk. But what about the safe stuff? What happens when you look at a big, boring, diversified stock market index, like the Russell 3000? You'd think the returns there would be way more evenly spread out, wouldn't you?
Well, you are not going to believe this. Since 1980, 40%, 40, of all the companies in that index had a catastrophic loss. They basically failed. The breakdown of winners and losers looks shockingly similar to the high-risk world of venture capital.
In fact, the entire 73 times gain of the market, all of it, came from just 7% of its companies. A tiny handful of extreme winners carried the entire weight of thousands of other companies that either failed or just went nowhere. Tails don't just matter, they are the only thing that matters.
So this isn't just an abstract thing about which stocks you own. It's also about how you personally behave. Actually, your own actions during a few very specific, scary moments can create the biggest tail events of your entire financial life.
All right, let's play out a little story. Imagine 3 investors over the last century or so. First, you've got Sue. She invests $1 every month, no matter what. Simple. Then there's Jim. He invests too, but he gets spooked during recessions and sells everything to cash. And then there's Tom, who's even worse. He panics late, sells near the bottom, and only gets back in after the recovery is well underway.
The results are, well, they're not even close. Sue, the one who just stayed consistent and did nothing special,
ends up with over $435,000. That is almost double what panicked Tom has. The only thing that separated them was how she acted during those brief, scary periods of recession. Her simple consistency created a massive, positive tail in her favor.
And this brings us to what might be the single most important lesson here. Your success isn't built during the calm years when everything's on cruise control. No, it is forged in those brief, punctuated moments of terror when everyone else is panicking. That's where your own tales are really made.
Okay, so what in the world do we do with all this? It means we need a totally new way of thinking. It means we have to give ourselves permission to fail.
And look, the greats, they already get this. Warren Buffett has owned maybe 500 different stocks in his life. He says he made almost all his money on just 10 of them. Jeff Bezos wasn't ashamed of the disastrous Fire Phone. He actually bragged that they were working on much bigger failures. And the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, he worries that their hit ratio is too high, that they're not failing often enough.
You see, they all understand the fundamental rule of the game. A few enormous wins will more than make up for the many, many inevitable failures. The home runs don't just pay for the strikeouts, they pay for them 100 times over.
I love how the legendary investor Peter Lynch puts it. He said, if you're terrific in this business, you're right 6 times out of 10. Think about that. Not 9 out of 10, 6. That leaves a huge margin for error.
And that really brings us to the final, most crucial point, perfectly summed up by George Soros. He said, it's not about whether you're right or wrong. What's important is how much money you make when you're right and how much you lose when you're wrong. One single massive tail event win can make a whole lifetime of small losses and mediocre bets totally and completely irrelevant. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. We now know that you can be wrong half the time, or even more, and still make an absolute fortune. The game isn't about being perfect. It's about surviving your mistakes long enough to catch that one big wave that changes everything. So what could you achieve in your career, with your money, in your life, if you really truly gave yourself permission to fail more often?